India is one of the most important countries in the world. One of the things that makes it so is its population, which is currently at over 1,252,000,000 people. And around the year 2040, India will become the most populous country on earth. Today, it's the second most populous after China. Now, the relationship between the United States and India is currently fairly a positive relationship. The United States and India share a common British heritage. Uh, India had been a British colony from the mid-19th to the mid-20th century. And of course, the United States began as a collection of British colonies. So there's that basic colonial heritage. Also, English is one of India's 22 official languages and one of its languages of government. The United States does not have an official language, but clearly English is the language of the federal government and the most commonly used language in the United States. Also, a number of states within the United States make English their official language. Now, the United States and India are both democracies, which is very important. And the reason why this is very important is because this brings them closer together as governments. Democracies do not go to war against one another, and this is therefore a very positive sign. Now, India has defied the odds by being a democracy. Generally speaking, countries have to reach a certain level of economic development before they become democracies, but this has not been the case with India. India has defied this pattern and has been able to establish itself as a democracy since its independence in 1947, even though it has been poor since that time and remains relatively poor to the present. Now, both the United States and India are multicultural societies, and they make efforts to try to respect the rights of minorities. In the United States, however, cultural assimilation into a single melting pot is much deeper and much more thoroughgoing than anything that you can find in India. So the United States has always operated on the principle of assimilation. You're supposed to learn the same language, you're supposed to dress in Western clothing, you're supposed to follow the same laws, same manners, but India has remained much more diverse, especially when it comes to languages and just manners and culture of different groups. So the variety, the multicultural variety, is much more stark in India, and India is much more of a salad bowl than a melting pot. That is to say, the distinct cultures are far more visible in India than they are in the United States. Also, India and the United States both face a serious threat from radical Islamic terrorism. India has fought against Islamic terrorism. It has also fought for wars against the country of Pakistan, its neighbor, which, like India, became independent of Great Britain in 1947. Pakistan means the land of the pure. Paki means pure, Stan means land. What is meant here is the land of Muslims. The Muslims are considered to be pure in this terminology. And all four wars implicated the disputed province of Kashmir, which both Pakistan and India claim for themselves, and a portion of it China claims for itself. But India has prevailed every time. India is a much larger country with a larger military, but the two countries remain rivals. The United States used to be closer to Pakistan than to India, but since 1992, after the demise of the Soviet Union, India began to move closer toward the United States. And for its part, the United States also began to move closer toward India because Pakistan became ever more receptive to the influence of Islamic fundamentalism. So as relations between Pakistan and the United States kind of soured a little bit, the relations between India and the United States have grown warmer. The United States and India are both wary of China. As everyone knows, China is a growing rapidly growing economy, and its military power is also rapidly increasing. Uh, China and India fought a war, the Sino-Indian War in 1962, in the Himalaya mountains. The United States' relations with China, of course, are better than India's relations with China, not only because India and China fought this border war in the mountains, but also because these are two different cultures and two different gigantic countries located next to one another, and therefore they are potential rivals. For the United States, this might be advantageous if the United States ever wants to play off India against China in its attempt to try to maintain dominance in Asia. So the United States is one of the great global powers might want in the future consider playing off these countries against one another. United States companies have outsourced a great deal of customer service support to India, so the United States and India also have common economic interests. Particularly companies like American Express and Dell Computer are well known for having outsourced a great deal of their customer support to call centers in India. Some call centers were brought back in the 2000s. They were brought back to the United States. Some have moved from India to the Philippines because American consumers were frequently unhappy with the customer service they received. India is also known for its software industry, which is centered in the south central city of Bangalore. Many students from India come to the United States, and they represent a very important component of the foreign student body in the United States. Many Indian IT specialists and engineers have contributed significantly to high-tech industry in the United States, particularly on the West Coast, in the Silicon Valley, in Northern California, and also in the aerospace industry. Differences between India and the United States are nevertheless real. We should not gloss over them. India is not quite a westernized democracy, even though it is a democracy. So what is it that differentiates India so much from more established Western democracies? First, as previously mentioned, India is very poor. Even if you look at comparison that is based on PPP, the so-called purchasing power parity, which takes into consideration the fact that prices are much lower in India than in Western democracies, even if you go by this PPP, then you will see that in India, per capita income, that is to say the income for every man, woman, and child in India is just over $6,000 as of the year 2015. And in the United States, it's over $55,000. So India is much poorer than Western democracies like the United States. Second, women do not, in practice, have the same rights as men, or even as they do in Western democracies. Even though the law might profess equality, and even though India had in the past had a female prime minister, Indira Gandhi, the truth of the matter is that the law cannot abolish what the culture establishes. And the traditional Hindu and Muslim cultures remain very traditional in India. Hindus are the majority in India. Muslims are the second largest group by numbers, so they are a very large minority. And both of these two cultures retain so-called traditional patriarchal attitudes toward women. And in this particular presentation, I do not have time to go into all the details, but suffice it to say that there are no equal rights between men and women in India. Third, corruption is endemic and often blatant in India. Now, clearly, corruption exists in all Western democracies, including in the United States, where it is greater than most people suppose. But nevertheless, in India, things are significantly worse. Transparency International, which is an organization that compiles this so-called Corruption Perception Index, ranked India number 76 tied with 6 other countries for that spot out of 167 countries in terms of corruption. So the greater the number, the more corrupt you are. So Scandinavian countries like Denmark, Finland, Sweden, they would be in 1, 2, 3. In the top 3, they would be the least corrupt. The United States is number 16. India is 76 through 82, indicating a very high degree of corruption, which is why you hear so often about buildings collapsing in India, major power outages that affect hundreds of millions of people. This is because in construction or in repairs, new materials are not always used. Sometimes they're stolen and then sold on the black market, and instead older materials are used, and then buildings or bridges collapse. Safety inspectors are being paid off, etc. So India has this third world corruption that is kind of still endemic. There is a fight against corruption, and some suggest that things are improving, but nevertheless, it remains a huge problem and a major obstacle for the development in that country.